Now, when you pull the trigger, when you fire a gun, what are the discharges coming out of the gun? Right? What are the discharges coming out of the gun? We'll discuss about that. See, you can see the bullet coming out. You can see flame. You can see gunpowder coming out. You can see smoke coming out. You have lot of discharges coming out. So we'll be discussing about each and everything. Let's discuss about that. See, what are the discharges coming out? Number 1, flame. Right? Number 2, smoke. Number 3, unburnt gunpowder or partially burnt gunpowder coming out. And the last one happens to be the bullet. If it is rifle firearm, if it is shotgun, you will have lead pellets and the wad coming out, depending on which gun that we use. For our discussion for now, we are taking a rifle gun. So let us discuss the discharges coming out of the rifle. As I told you, what are the discharges coming out? The first one you can remember, that is flame. You can see that is flame coming out, right? Flame is coming out, right? And then you have smoke, right? You have unburnt gunpowder or partially burnt gunpowder coming out. And finally, the projectile, that is bullet. Let us say bullet coming out. So all these things are coming out. What are the effects of these discharges? That is again very, very important. What are the effects of these discharges? See, flame, on coming out of the barrel, on coming out of the muzzle end, on impact with the skin, it causes what is called as burning. It causes burning of the skin. It causes charring of the skin. It not only causes charring, do remember, it also produces singeing of hair. Right? It produces singeing of hair. You have burning, you have charring, you also have singeing of hair. This is due to flame. What about smoke? Talking about smoke, to remember, it produces what is called as blackening of the skin. It produces blackening of the skin, right? This blackening is also called as smudging, right? Blackening or smudging. The smoke comes at a high velocity. It gets deposited on the skin surface. You can see it gets deposited on the skin surface. We call it as blackening. It gets deposited on the skin surface. That is very important. We'll discuss about that. Then we've got gunpowder, that is partially burnt gunpowder or unburnt gunpowder, that comes at a high velocity. It gets embedded in the skin layers. It gets embedded in the skin layers. Whereas when I was talking about smoke, it gets deposited on the surface of the skin. But unburnt gunpowder, partially burnt gunpowder, it comes at a high velocity. It gets embedded in the skin layers. We call this as tattooing. Right? We call this as tattooing, which is also called as stippling. We can also call this as peppering. You have lot of synonyms for this. Everything is same. Everything is same. Suppose in case you are not sure, when you are looking at the wound, you are not sure whether it is blackening or tattooing. See, this is the layer of the skin. You can see epidermis and dermis. When you look at this blackening, the blackening will be on the surface of the skin. Whereas this gunpowder, it gets embedded in the skin layers. You can see that. And that is the reason why, if you're not sure, you can see something which is black, you're not sure whether it is blackening or tattooing, what you can do is take a wet cloth, wipe it. If you're wiping it with a wet cloth, had it been blackening, blackening will be removed. But tattooing cannot be removed because it is in the skin layers. That's an easy way to differentiate. Right? So let's go forward. Let us start with, let us again continue with our discussion of discharges. I told you we have unburnt gunpowder, we have got tattooing, stippling or peppering, everything is same. But do remember, this kind of tattooing or peppering or stippling is unlikely that you can see in the palms and soles, because the skin is so thicker, it is unlikely that you will see in the palms and soles. Usually you don't see tattooing in the palms and soles. Coming to the bullet, the most important fellow, the hero of the story, the bullet, right? The bullet coming out, you can see it produces what is called as punctured wounds, right? It produces punctured wound. It punctures the skin, enters inside. It is punctured wound, right? It not only produces punctured wound, it produces two important collars. What are the two important collars? The first collar is called as grease collar. It's called as grease collar. It is otherwise called as dirt collar, because the dirt It is otherwise called as bullet wipe. One of your previous AIMS exam question, bullet wipe. Okay, grease collar, dirt collar, bullet wipe, everything same. And we have one more important collar. We call this as abrasion collar. Right? Abrasion collar. So basically, the bullet produces three effects. What are the three effects? You've got punctured wound, you've got grease collar, you've also got abrasion collar. So we'll discuss about what is the mechanism of this abrasion collar and the grease collar. Let us assume that. Let us discuss about that. Right? So do remember, guys, this is the most important slide in our discussion. Right? The entire discussion, this is again the most important slide. You need to know what are the effects, what are the discharges that is coming out, and what are the effects produced by the discharges. And do remember, it is advisable that you remember in the same sequence. First one is flame, second one is smoke, third one is gunpowder, and the last one to reach is bullet. Right? So you need to remember the same sequence. There is a reason behind it. We'll discuss about that. Right? Now you see, I told you we have got abrasion collar, grease collar. Let us assume this is the barrel of the gun. Right? We will be adding some grease or lubricant material in the surface, in the internal surface of the barrel for lubrication purpose. Lubrication purpose. Right? Now, assuming that this bullet coming out of the barrel, when the bullet is coming out of this barrel, the grease which is present in the inner surface of the barrel can also be seen on the surface of the bullet. Yes or no? Yes. Right? Now, this bullet is going to enter into the skin. Let us assume this is the skin. Right? This is the skin. Right? First, you can see this is the skin. Now, you can see the bullet is about to enter. This is the bullet that is about to enter the skin. Right? You can see this is the skin that is stretched by the bullet. And after some time, what happens? The bullet has entered into the skin. You can see this is entered into the skin. Right? So you can see I've just drawn in different ranges. Bullet is coming just out of the barrel, number one. Second figure is about to enter. Third figure, it has already entered by puncturing the skin. You can see that when the bullet, you can see this particular area where the bullet is about to enter the skin, the grease which is present on the surface of the bullet will be deposited in the margin of the wound. Right? You can see the deposition of grease from the surface of the bullet in the margin of the wound. This is called grease collar. Basically, the grease collar is the deposition of the grease in the margin of the wound. We can say this is the deposition of grease. Right? The grease which was present on the surface of the bullet, it is getting deposited in the margin of the wound. Very simple. Very, very simple. Why is it called as bullet wipe? Because when the bullet is entering into the skin is wiping off all the grease from the surface of the bullet. It has wiped off everything. That's why it is called as bullet wipe. As simple as that. Right? So it is called as grease collar, also called as bullet wipe. Bullet wipe. Right? Bullet has wiped off everything. Right? All the grease has gone to the skin. You can see there is no grease on the bullet at all. Everything is wiped off. Fine. Now, what is the reason for abrasion collar? You can see the same figure when the bullet is coming out. Right? It has come. And it is not coming just like that. It is spinning and coming. You can see there is spinning bullet coming out. It is not just bullet. It is a spinning bullet. Right? You have to be very precise. Not just bullet, it is a spinning bullet that is coming out. And here, when the bullet is about to enter into the skin, the bullet is spinning, the skin is stretched. You can see that here the skin is stretched. You can see the skin is stretched in that area. Right? It is indenting. The spinning bullet is it is causing indentation. To put it in simple words, it is stretching the skin. When it is stretching the skin and it is spinning, you can see at this point there is a friction between the spinning bullet and the margin of the skin. There is a friction between the spinning bullet and the margin of the skin. You know very well, we discussed it earlier, whenever there is a friction, you will have an abrasion. This is where we will get an abrasion. That is because of the friction between the spinning bullet and the margin of the skin. right? The spinning bullet and the margin of the skin, you get an abrasion that is called abrasion collar, right? So basically, abrasion collar is due to the spinning action of the bullet, or you can say it is a gyroscopic action of the bullet that is producing this abrasion collar. So that means only when you have the bullet which is spinning, you will have abrasion collar. If you don't have the bullet that is to be spinning, if you don't have a spinning bullet, it will not produce abrasion collar, as simple as that, right? So this is the gyroscopic, it is grooving everything, it's grooving everything, right? But this abrasion collar, sometimes it is not seen. Whenever you have any yielding surface, like your abdomen or buttocks, right, you will not have abrasion collar, right? You will not have abrasion collar. Fine. So I've told you three important effects, right? Three important effects. You can see bullet produces punctured wound, grease collar, abrasion collar. So this is the mechanism, right? Now, if you want to see the wound, right? If you want to see the wound, I can draw the wound, assuming that this is the punctured wound produced by the bullet. Just around it, you have what is called as grease collar. You can see this is your grease collar. This is your grease collar, which is around the punctured wound. Around the grease collar, you will be having what is called as abrasion collar. You can see this is abrasion collar, right? So this is your abrasion collar. You have grease collar, you also have abrasion collar. Very simple. Now the point is, which is so diagnostic of this entry wound? The grease collar is diagnostic of entry wound. Abrasion collar is not diagnostic of entry wound. We'll be discussing why we are telling like that. We will also have other situations where we'll have abrasion, right? See, abrasion collar is not your diagnostic point of entry wound. We'll discuss why we say like that. Okay, so do remember, I told you we have your flame, smoke, gunpowder and the bullet. Coming to the basics. So this is very, very important basics, right? This slide becomes very, very important for you. You need to have a clarity on this. You need to have a strong foundation on this particular slide. Only then will be able to move on further. Right? Now I told you that we have abrasion collar. Have a look at this different effects. You can see the bullet coming out. You can see flame. You can see smoke, and you can also see the unburnt gunpowder coming out, right? Unburnt gunpowder coming out. So these are all the discharges I told you. In addition to these discharges, you may have hot gases, you may have carbon monoxide, all these things will be there. But these are all the most important discharges that you need to know for the examination purpose, right? Now you can see the blackening. This is the blackening. Fine, this is the blackening. Now fine, now you can go ahead. You can see this is the punctured wound. Around the punctured wound, we have grease collar. Around the grease collar, we have got abrasion collar, and around it, we have got a flame effect, burning. We have got smoke effect, that is blackening. We have also got unburned gunpowder. This is tattooing effects, right? I have told you all the discharges. I have told you what are all the effects that we have got. Now, when you are looking at the abrasion collar, it is very important that you need to look at the shape of the abrasion collar. Why is it so? That is because imagine this person is being shot. Look at the direction of the bullet. This bullet is a perpendicular bullet, directly entering. You take a gun, shoot. Whereas here the bullet is entering perpendicularly, in which you will have a circular abrasion collar. Exactly circular, because it is entering perpendicularly. In case if the person is shot in this direction, you can see this is not a perpendicular bullet, this is an oblique bullet, wherein you will find oval abrasion collar like this. So it will tell you whether the bullet is entering the skin perpendicularly or it is entering obliquely. You will be able to comment on the trajectory of the bullet, the shape of abrasion collar, right? So that is what we need to understand from this. Right? Now I told you that we have all these effects: flame, smoke, unburned gunpowder and the bullet. Everything is coming out, right? But till what distance that you can see the flame, smoke and unburned gunpowder? See, this is a highly variable depending on what ammunition you use, depending on what smoke, gunpowder that we use, right? Depending on what primer that we use, it is going to be varying. But let us see the average range. Flame, smoke, gunpowder, right? If it is a shotgun, right? Let us say if it is a rifle gun, we'll see separately for a rifle gun and a shotgun, right? If it is a rifle gun, the flame can travel up to 8 centimeters. right? The smoke can travel up to 15 centimeters. Unburned gunpowder can travel up to 60 to 90 centimeters. Whereas if it is shotgun, the smoke flame itself can travel up to 15 centimeters. The smoke can travel up to 30 centimeters, whereas the unburned gunpowder can travel up to 60 to 90 centimeters. Right, rifle gun and a shotgun. Suppose if you use a small handheld rifle, just like your revolver and pistol, the gunpowder cannot travel up to 60 meters, 60 centimeters also. See, all these are centimeters. It cannot travel. If it is for a rifle or pistol, it cannot travel for 60 centimeters also. Maybe you can say 50 centimeters. If it for revolver or pistol, the gunpowder can travel up to a maximum 50 centimeters. That's all. Right? Fine. So this is about the average range, and it is highly variable depending on what kind of dart gun you use, depending on whether you use choking or not, depending on whether you use silencers or not, depending on which gunpowder that we use. Right? There are so many factors which influence on this. So let us talk about finding out the range of a rifle gun. Let's talk first with the rifle gun. We are entering into wound ballistics, right? We are going to talk about the range determination from the wound. We are going to learn about wound ballistics, right? First, let's start about the rifle gun. Then we'll be moving on for the shotgun, right? So let's start with the rifle gun. You need to know what are the different ranges that we have got, right? You can see these are all the discharge that we have got. We have got the bullet coming out, flame, smoke, unburned gunpowder that is coming out. Right? See, though you have all the discharges that is coming out, everything cannot go together. It cannot go for a same distance. Right? The flame cannot travel up to a distance of 90 centimeters, up to a distance just like a bullet. You can see that just now I told you which is the first one to stop in all these things. Forget about the measurement, forget about the distance, forget about the centimeters. You tell me which is the first to stop. You can see first to stop is flame, then smoke, then again gunpowder. You can see the first one to stop is flame, then you have smoke, then you have gunpowder. The last to reach will be the bullet. The last to reach will be the bullet. That is why I told you to remember in the same sequence. Flame, smoke, gunpowder and the bullet. Right? Flame, smoke, gunpowder and the bullet. Now let me tell you what are the different ranges that we have got. We have got basically what is called as contact shot, in contact with the skin. Then we have got close shot. What is the close shot? Which is inside the range of flame. When the victim is inside the flame, you call it as close shot. Right? Then we have got near shot. Near shot is something where the person is outside the flame but inside the smoke. Right? And then the person has got intermediate shot. In intermediate shot where the person is outside the smoke but inside the gunpowder. And the last shot is distant shot where the person is outside the gunpowder. Right? I told you contact, close, near, intermediate, distance. What is contact? Contact. Contact is contact. Very simple. You have close. Close is inside the flame. The near shot is outside the flame but inside the smoke. Intermediate is outside the smoke but inside the gunpowder. When the person is outside the gunpowder, you call this as distant. Right? This is step 2 in learning about wound ballistics. Step 1 is the discharges. Step 2 is the range. Right? When you understand this range properly, when you understand this slide properly, it is so very easy to find out the wound range. Very, very easy. Right? I would advise that you need to spend some time in learning this slide so that we'll be able to easily find out the range later. Right? Now, first one, let's talk about contact shot. What is a contact shot? I told you contact shot is something where you keep the gun in contact with the skin. Right? Now, but in contact shot itself that you've got lot of ranges. We'll be discussing on that. Right? Lot of types are there. You take a gun, you keep that gun in tight contact with the skin like this. Tight contact. Right? You are pressing the skin, tight contact. What happens is you can see this happens to be the barrel. You can see this is the barrel. You can see this happens to be the barrel. Right? And you can see the gun is kept in tight contact with the skin. There is no gap, absolutely no gap between the skin and the gun. So now you pull the trigger, the bullet comes out, all the discharges come out. You can see the bullet produces a central punctured wound. Very simple. But now you see the flame is coming out, smoke is coming out, unburned gunpowder coming out. When all these discharges coming out, there is no gap between the skin and the gun. So it cannot escape outside. It has to pass through the tissues. It has to go into the tissues. you will be seeing the effects of burning, blackening and tattooing everything inside the track of the wound. That is because you kept it in tight contact with the skin. It cannot escape. Very, very simple. As you keep the gun in tight contact with the skin, because of the muscle end of the gun, it produces an impression on the skin. You will find an abrasion. Right? This is a pressure abrasion. We discussed it earlier. This is called recoil abrasion. Right? Recoil abrasion, you can also call it as muscle impression. Right? Because the skin is in tight contact with the skin. Tight contact. Right? So it cannot, the effects cannot escape. It has to go inside. It has to go inside. Now let us discuss about another variation where this is the same gun. You can see this is the barrel of the gun. This is the same gun. Fine. And now you see there is a small gap between the skin and the gun. Very small gap. That's how I magnified. That's why you are able to see so much of gap. But in reality, there will be a small gap. You can call this as loose contact. You can call this as loose contact. There's a small gap. What happens is you pull the trigger, the bullet comes out, bullet enters faster, it punctures the wound, it enters inside, right? The gunpowder also enters inside. But what is escaping? You can see the smoke, sometimes the flame escapes through the small gap. It escapes through the small gap, it gets deposited in the adjacent skin, right? You can see the blackening in the adjacent skin. You can see that this is the wound produced by the bullet, right? You can see the bullet, right? Around the bullet, you are able to see, right? Blackish deposition, right? So this is called as, this is due to the smoke escaping outside through the small gap. This is called as corona, right? So this is called as corona. When it is loose contact, you're talking about loose contact. Depending on the shape of the corona, you can say whether it's a perpendicular shot or an angle shot. So that is outside the purview of this discussion. You just remember it is corona. Very simple. Right? I told you tight contact. I've also told you loose contact. Right? There is one more contact is there wherein you can see this is the barrel of the gun. Right? And you can see this is the skin which is in tight contact. You can see the barrel of the gun which is in tight contact. But the area where it is kept, it is not the area like abdomen or the face, not like that. It is on the scalp. It is on the skull wherein you have a bone underneath. So this is a very strong bone. You have got strong hard surface, that is your bone, just under the skin, So now what happens? You pull the trigger. Bullet comes out. Bullet fractures the skin, it enters inside, there is no problem with that. But now the problem is, not only the bullet that is coming out, you see lot of smoke and hot gases coming out. These hot gases, it diffuses, right, in between the scalp and the skull vault. When it is causing a bulging of the skin, when it is causing a bulging of the scalp, this gas, hot gas, tries to escape outside by rupturing the skin here. Right? I repeat, when you have a gun which is in contact with the bony prominence, just like scalp, the hot gas will diffuse in between the skin and the skull vault, skin and the bone. It will cause a temporary bulge. It tries to come outside. It tries to come outside by rupturing the skin itself. When it is rupturing the skin, you will not find a central circular hole. Instead, you can see splitting of the skin like this. When you can see splitting on the skin like this, this is called cruciate splitting, or it is stellate wound. Right? Cruciate or stellate. This kind of energy that is coming out from the bony surface, we call this as, remember friends, we call this as blast effect. Right? This is called blast effect. I have told you 3 types of contact shot. Tight contact, everything goes inside. Loose contact, smoke alone escapes. When you keep it on a bony prominence, it backs out, right? It is just reflecting back, wherein you can see the blast effect, where the shape of the gunshot wound will not be round, will not be circular. Instead, you will find a stellate or cruciate margins. I have told you the 3 different types of contact shot. 3 different types of contact shot. So contact shot is done. The next shot is close shot. But for you to learn this, let me show you this slide. You need to see this slide, right? In case if the person stands from this point to this point, what is that range called as? That is called close range. Why is it called close range? Because it is lying inside the range of flame. Suppose if the person stands from this point to this point, this range is called as near range. Why this is called near range? Because it is outside the flame but inside the smoke. Suppose if the victim stands from this point to this point, this is called intermediate range. Why it is called intermediate range? That is because it is outside the smoke but inside the range of gunpowder. Fine. When the victim stands outside this range, you call it as distant because it is outside the gunpowder. As simple as that. Right? We have not done anything. We have just learned that slide and we are just going to apply this. Contact, close, near, intermediate, distant. Finished. Contact I have already told you. This is close, near, intermediate, distant. In case if the person is standing in a close range, right? In a close range, what have you got? You can see in a close range, you have got flame, everything is there. So you will find the entry wound with abrasion collar plus grease collar. In addition to that, you will have burning effect. You will have burning effect because of flame. You will have blackening effect. That is because of smoke. You will also have tattooing effect. That is because of gunpowder. So when you see all the discharges, you can easily say that it has to be a close shot. Right? Coming to the near shot. What is a near shot? Which is not there. In near shot, flame is not there. So you will find the entry wound plus abrasion collar and grease collar. Right? You will not be seeing the burning effect because flame is not there. But still, you will find blackening effect. You will find tattooing effect. When you see this thing, then it has to be a near shot. Now moving on to intermediate shot. What is the intermediate shot? That is outside the smoke but inside the gunpowder. What is not there? In the intermediate shot, you can see bullet is there. So entry wound will be there. Abrasion collar will be there. Grease collar will be there. Burning? No flame. Blackening? No smoke. So blackening is not there. But gunpowder is there. You will find tattooing. Right? Okay, so that is intermediate shot. What about distant shot? That is outside the gunpowder. What is there? Only bullet is there. So you will have entry wound plus abrasion collar, grease collar. You know that wherever you have a bullet, you will have abrasion collar, grease collar. Right? So you can see I've told you all the ranges. I've also told you what are the effects that you can see on the wound. Fine. So it's very, very basic logic, right? Whatever discharges are there, that discharge effect will be seen in the entry wound. As simple as that. If you are able to see all the discharges, it has to be close shot. If you are not able to see burning, near shot. No burning, no blackening, intermediate shot. No burning, only bullet hole is there. Let's keep it simple. Only bullet hole is there, then it has to be distant shot. Right? So I hope it is clear. Let us see all these ranges. You can see this is a contact shot, right? I told you loose contact wherein you can see corona, right? This is your blast effect. I told you wherever you have a bony prominence, you can see there is the energy, the gas, it bulges the skin, it ruptures outside, coming out to produce a wound like this. I told you this is cruciate or stellate appearance. Contact shot on a bony prominence, you can see that it is a bony prominence. Very, very simple, right? Now this is another shot. You can see entry hole is there, blackening is there, tattooing is there, some amount of charring is also there. So when all these discharges are there, you can say that is close shot. You can see this shot. Here you can see gunshot wound is there. You can also see your tattooing. Right? This is entry wound is there and tattooing is there. Obviously it has to be intermediate shot. When nothing is there, only bullet hole is there, you can easily say that it has to be a distant shot. As simple as that. Right? So do remember guys, you don't have to do anything. Number one, you need to know what are the discharges. Number two, you need to know what are the effects. Number three, you need to know the 5 ranges. Contact, close, near, intermediate, distant. That is sufficient. You'll be easily able to find out what range it is. Right? Very, very easy. Now let me tell you one more important effect. Let us assume this is the gun. This kind of effect is normally seen with a shotgun, right? You keep the gun in tight contact with the skin. I told you what are the things that will be happening in a tight contact. That is fine. But what happens when you pull the trigger, bullet has gone into the skin. Bullet and the discharges, they have gone into the skin. But what happens inside the barrel? Inside the barrel, you will be able to find the development of sudden vacuum. Right? Sudden vacuum will be there, which is this sudden vacuum inside the barrel of the gun. It is sucking off all the blood and the tissues from the wound itself. Right? You can see the presence of blood, some amount of blood and the tissues. You can see the presence of blood and the tissues, sucking of the blood and tissues. Why there is sucking of blood and tissues? That is because of the sudden vacuum development. This kind of suctioning of the blood and the tissues into the barrel of the gun, remember friends, this is called back spatter. Right? Spattering of the tissues and the blood back into the barrel of the gun, that is called back spatter. That is called back spatter. Fine? It's called as back spatter. This is very important. Right? Yes guys, we'll have to see with one more important terminology, that is called fouling. What do you mean by fouling? Let us assume this is a barrel. Right? You are using a rifle. This is a rifle, right? So you pull the trigger, what has to come out? Bullet has to come out. Let us say bullet is coming out. When the bullet is coming out through the barrel, because of the friction between the bullet and the inner surface of the barrel, some amount of metallic particles will be scraped off from the bullet. So these scraped off particle, when the bullet is coming out, these scrape off particle will also be coming out around the wound. Suppose if this is the entry wound, around the wound you can see the deposition of the metallic fragments. You can see the deposition of metallic fragments. We call this as fouling, right? We call this as fouling. Do remember, this will be learning one more fouling, metallic fouling, that is later. So this is called as wound fouling, also called as fouling. Now let's discuss another important area. Assuming the victim is there with two gunshot wounds, one in the front of the chest, another one in the back of the chest. The police wants to know that whether the person was shot from front to back or back to front. In other words, you want to know whether which is entry and which is exit. Right? Which is entry, which is exit. You can easily find out, right? There should not be any confusion here. You can easily find out which is entry and which is exit. Right? Which is exit and which is entry. What are the characters of entry wound and exit wound? Right? You don't need to have anything. You just need only one thing. That is your common sense. Right? So if you have common sense, then you can easily understand the mechanism of what is the feature of entry and what is the feature of exit. Suppose you have a gun. You shoot. When you are shooting here, entry will be inverted, exit will be inverted. You have a gun here. So along with the bullet, flame is there, smoke is there, gunpowder is there. You can see the burning, blackening, tattooing in the entry wound, not the exit wound. Bullet is entering in this side. So you'll have grease collar, abrasion collar in the entry, not in the exit. Right? So it's very simple. Now you can see that margins will be inverted in entry. Right? And you look at the shape of the size of the wound, the size of the entry is normally smaller than the exit. Right? Because what happens is normally, see, entry wound will be smaller, exit will be larger. There is one exception that you have to know, that is contact shot. If it is contact shot and it has got screw sheet or stellate margin, the entry can also be larger than the exit. That is one exception. Otherwise, it is usually smaller. I told you we will be having abrasion collar, grease collar, and we will also be having the presence of flame effect, smoke effect, and gunpowder effect. Everything will be seen in the entry. Right? Sometimes you have cherry red discoloration of the skin can also be there. That is due to carbon monoxide. Right? Now look at the exit. Very simple, everted margins. Right? It is coming out, so it like everted margins. When the bullet is coming out, it is not the bullet alone that is coming out. You will also have the tissue protrusion. You will also blood that is spattering coming out. Okay, so all these things will be seen with exit. You can easily find out which is entry and which is exit. Right? Should not be any difficulty. You can see this, I told you already, this is an entry wound, that is distant shot, we saw that earlier. So this is your exit. Fine. Now you can see that this is another exit wound. Fine. Now let us see one more important phenomenon. Suppose the person is there without any support in the back, you shoot, the bullet goes inside, it comes out, there is no difficulty. Right? It's everything as we have discussed earlier. But now imagine the person is standing on a solid platform, solid support. You can see the person is leaning on a solid support, right? Now if you pull the trigger, you take a gun and you pull the trigger, the bullet goes inside and it comes outside. Now the point is, the entry wound is as normal as like we discussed earlier, right? Entry wound will be same, there is no difficulty, there is no difference at all. But when the bullet is exiting, now the bullet cannot come out so easily because there is one solid support is there. This fellow is leaning on a wall. When this fellow is leaning on a wall, there is a solid support. The bullet cannot come out so easily. The bullet will try to come out. There is a resistance. When there is a resistance, what happens? The bullet tries to come out. It is spinning there itself. There is a skin crushing between the spinning bullet and the wall. Right? There is a crushing of the skin. You can see there is small crushing of the skin between the spinning bullet and the support that is behind. Okay, support that is behind. Because there is a support, bullet cannot come out so easily. When there is no support, bullet can come out so easily. When there is a support like this, the bullet cannot come out so easily. The bullet will be resisting. Bullet will be facing a resistance to come out. When the bullet is facing a resistance to come out, the skin is getting crushed between spinning bullet and the support. Right? Here around the exit wound, you can see if this is the exit wound, around the exit wound, you'll be able to find out a small abrasion around the exit wound. Right? You'll be able to find out a small abrasion around the exit wound. This is called as shored exit wound. Right? This is called as shored exit wound, also called as supported exit wound. Right? Supported exit wound. Because when there is a support, not only wall, anything. If the person is wearing a tight belt, right? Bullet has gone inside, but when he is trying to come out, the exit wound, the skin is supported by a belt. It cannot come out so easily. Again, you can have shored exit wound. Right? Can be any support at the exit site. It can be any support at the exit site. We'll be able to find out shored exit wound, otherwise called as supported exit wound. We need to keep this in mind while we are interpreting the exit wound. Fine? Right. Now, there is one more important discussion that we need to have. Let us say skull. Right? The person has got skull, entry and exit. Right? You take a gun, you shoot. Entry is there, exit is there. Right? From the scalp, you can easily find out. But what if you have a skull alone? How would you find out which is entry and which is exit from the appearance of the bone in the skull? Right? How will you find out? So now let us have a discussion of how to find out entry in a skull and exit wound in a skull. Right? For that, you need to remember, see, the skull has got two important tables. Right? You can see this is your outer table. And do remember, this is your inner table. Right? You can see this is your inner table. The skull has got two tables, outer table and inner table. Right? You can see that. In this skull, what we have to look for is, see, we want to find out whether the wound is clean, punched in wound, or whether it has got beveling. We want to find out that. What do you mean by beveling? Beveling is nothing but chipping of the small bone. Small chipping of the bone will be there in the table. We are going to find out that. Now, when do you get this beveling? Beveling is seen in any table which has got no support. That means beveling is seen in unsupported table of the skull. Right? Beveling is seen whenever you have unsupported table of the skull. Right? I told you skull has got two tables, outer table, inner table. Now let us see, this is the bullet. You are shooting. The bullet travels. First, it breaks away the outer table. Then it fractures the inner table. It has gone inside. It has to come out. It is fracturing the inner table. And then it is fracturing the outer table. It is coming out. This is a sequence. Outer table, inner table, outer table. Now the point is, in which table that you will be seeing the beveling and which table we will see the clean punched wound. See, any table which has got no support, I told you, any table which is unsupported will show beveling. Now see, for example, if this If this bullet is entering the outer table first, you can see it is fracturing the outer table. Outer table has got a support of inner table. You will not see beveling. Instead, you will see a clean punched wound. Now it is fracturing the inner table. Now you can see that the inner table does not have any support. You can see beveling. Fine. Now again the bullet goes inside. When the bullet is going inside, it has to come out. When it is coming out, first it is fracturing the inner table. Inner table has got a support of outer table. It does not show beveling. Clean punched wound will be there. Now it is fracturing the outer table. Outer table does not have any support. You can see the presence of beveling. Right? Now you can easily see that whenever the table is unsupported, it will show beveling. Right? You can see this is the entry wound. In the entry wound, the inner table got bevel. In exit wound, the outer table got bevel. Right? You can see that very easily. This is the concept that you need to understand. You can see that this is your entry and this is your exit. We are looking at the scalp. Now look at the same injury inside. You can see this is a clean punched wound. There is no beveling. What you are seeing is outer table. Right? But here again you are seeing the outer table wherein you are able to see beveling. That means this one is entry and this one is exit. Right? This one is entry and this one is exit. When the outer table shows beveling, obviously it is exit. Right? Here outer table does not show beveling, but when you see inside, inner table must be beveled. Inner table must be beveled. Here we are not able to see the inner table. Right? But this is the concept that I told you to understand. Do remember, there is one more easy way to remember. You can remember like this: entry wound. Right? You can remember entry wound. Right? And exit wound. Entry means bullet going inside. So that is the reason why inner table shows beveling. Right? You will find inner table beveling because entry means going inside. Exit means bullet coming outside. So it has to be outer table beveling. That is the easiest way that you can remember. You can remember this and you can retain this, answer the MCQ very easily. Right? Fine. So this is what you need to remember. Entry means inner table, exit means outer table. Here you can again see the same thing. Here the exit or outer table is not bevel, it has to be entry. Now here the outer table is bevel in this, so it has to be exit wound. It has to be exit wound. Right? As easy as that. Fine. So let's go forward. We'll move on to the another important discussion wherein you need to answer a question whether the bullet has come from a particular gun or not. The second question that you need to ask is whether this particular accused has used the gun or not. So there are two important questions that you need to answer with regard to firearm investigations. Right? So let us see whether is it possible or not. See, when you're looking at the bullet, let us say one victim is brought for autopsy. You're doing autopsy. While you're doing autopsy, you could recover a bullet from inside the body of the victim. Right? We recover from the victim, right? So let us say when the bullet is recovered from the victim, we name it as crime bullet. Right? It is recovered from the crime scene or it is recovered from the victim's body, whatever. It's crime bullet. The bullet which is involved in the crime. You call it as crime bullet. Right? Now, is it possible to find out whether the bullet has come from the accused gun or not? The police has arrested accused. They have found out one gun from his house. The police wants to know whether the bullet has comes from the accused gun or not. Is it possible or not? This type of study, right? Identifying the gun, right? From the markings of the bullet. We are going to study the markings of the bullet. Identifying the gun from the markings of the bullet. Remember friends, this is called as bullet fingerprinting. Right? The technique of identifying whether the bullet has come from a particular gun or not, that is called bullet fingerprinting. That's called bullet fingerprinting. You're going to study the markings of the bullet. Based on that, you will find whether it has come from this particular gun or not. That is called bullet fingerprinting. In this bullet fingerprinting technique, you need to know two important markings. What are the two important markings? Let us assume that this is the barrel, right, of a rifle. We are talking about bullet, so it has to be rifle. You can see the bullet, right? The bullet is coming out of this barrel of the gun. The barrel of this rifle, you know very well, it has got multiple groovings. multiple groovings. If the bullet is coming out of this barrel, if the bullet is coming out of this barrel of a gun, the rifling grooves, you can see the barrel, you have got rifling, the bullet is coming through it, the rifling grooves, as the bullet comes out through it, the rifling grooves will be producing marking on the bullet. Right? You can see the rifling grooves producing marking on the bullet. Riflings of the gun produces marking on the bullet. We call this as primary marking. We call this as primary marking, right? Which is also called as class characteristics. Why it is called as class characteristics? That is because, right, the rifling pattern will be the same for all the guns in same model of the gun, right? If you take one model of the gun, right, if you take a model of the gun, the rifling grooves will be the same in all the guns of that model, right? That specific model. Fine, that specific model. So this primary or class characteristics will tell you an idea about the make of the gun or the model of the gun. Right? It will tell you an idea about what is the make of the gun and what is the model of the gun. But in that model of the gun, you will not have only one gun. You may have hundreds or thousands of guns. Right? How to find out from which gun it has come from? For that, we are seeking the help of another marking. That another marking is called as secondary markings, which is produced by irregularities of the barrel. Right? Which is produced by irregularities of the barrel. Fine, we call this as secondary marking. Primary markings are produced by rifling pattern, secondary markings are produced by irregularities, and this irregularities is otherwise called as individual characteristics. That means it will be varying from gun to gun. It will be varying from gun to gun. Now the primary markings are produced by rifling pattern and the secondary markings are produced by irregularities. But what is causing this irregularity? What are the irregularities we are talking about? Number one, see, when you constantly use this gun, right, there may be some wear and tear changes. These wear and tear changes will be different for each gun to gun, right? You can't use all the guns in the same way, right? Some guns might have been used many times, some guns might not have used, right? So due to constant wear and tear, you can have some irregularities. That is one reason. Second reason is there may be some manufacturing defect in that particular gun that may cause irregularity. Or there may be something else called metallic fouling. What do you mean by metallic fouling? When you fire a bullet through the barrel, because of the heat that is generated during firing, the lead will get molten. Lead will melt, and you can see the lead getting deposited sometimes inside the barrel of the gun itself. Right? They are called as metallic fouling. They are called as metallic fouling. Whenever the bullet is coming through this kind of barrel, these metallic fouling or the deposits or the projections, it will produce additional marking on the bullet. It will produce additional marking on the bullet that will be individual to each gun. Right? I told you irregularities are individual to each gun. What are the reasons? It may be constant wear and tear. It may be due to manufacturing defect. It may also be due to metallic fouling. Now you have primary marking. You also have secondary marking, which will tell you the make of the gun, the primary marking. Which will tell you which gun it is secondary marking, which is so unique. The secondary marking is so unique. And that is the reason why we call it as fingerprint of the gun. Secondary marking is otherwise called as fingerprint of a gun. What does it mean? The gun's fingerprint is there on the bullet. Right? That particular gun's fingerprint is there on a bullet. That's why it is called fingerprint of a gun. That is so unique for each gun. Right? Now what are we supposed to do? You can see this is your bullet. You can see this is the primary marking. You can see the primary marking. Primary markings are produced by rifling pattern. It will tell you only the make of the gun, the model of the gun. Now this is the primary marking. Do remember they are macroscopic. You don't need to have any specific instrument to see this. You can easily see that. But now the point is you want to look at the microscopic pattern. You zoom out the primary marking. You can see all the markings on the bullet. They are basically seen as individual striations. right? They are individual striations. Fine. And you remember, these are the individual striations. It will be unique to each gun. What you have to do is, you need to take this microscope. This is called comparison microscope. This is called comparison microscope. You take that crime bullet which you have already gotten. I told you we have got crime bullet. So let us say this is crime bullet. You take the gun from the accused, put one fresh bullet, fire it. That is called test firing. Bullet will come out, right? You take, that is test bullet. We have got crime bullet, that is from the crime scene or from the victim's body. Another one is test bullet that you got when you were test firing. Keep the two bullets under microscope. When you are keeping these two bullets under microscope, right, look through the eyepiece. When you are seeing through the eyepiece, you need to match the markings. How will you match the marking? Let us say this is the eyepiece. This belongs to test bullet. This belongs to crime bullet. If the striations, if the markings of the test bullet and the markings of the crime bullet are exactly aligning with each other, you can say both the bullets have come from same gun. Suppose you see this is the eyepiece, you can see this belongs to test bullet, this belongs to crime bullet. If the markings of the test bullet, right, does not correspond to the markings of the crime bullet, that means two bullets have come from two different guns. As simple as that. Right? So this is called comparison microscope, wherein you can study both the test bullet and the crime bullet together. When you are seeing through the microscope, you are not seeing only the secondary marking. It is not computed that you auto delete all the primary marking. When you are seeing through the microscope, all the marking that is available in the bullet will be visible. Right? You need to see that. You need to find out whether it is aligning or not, matching or not. Based on that, you can find out whether the bullet has come from the, whether two bullets have come from the same gun or not. Right? Now, the point is, when you're handling the bullet, you need to be very specific that you do not use tooth forceps. Right? You can use rubber tip forceps, or you can use your gloved hands to handle the bullet. So when you are using your tooth forceps for recovering the bullet, what happens? It will produce additional markings on the bullet. When it is causing additional markings on the bullet, so it will cause a lot of confusion. You will not be able to do this study properly. So do remember bullet fingerprinting. I told you that it is a technique of finding out. I told you primary marking. I told you secondary marking. Primary marking is produced by rifling pattern. Secondary marking is produced by irregularities. We are going to learn that, and we'll be finding out whether the bullet has come from a gun or not. Now you have proved the bullet has come from accused gun. Now, the next question that you need to ask is, the next question that you need to answer is, right, police will ask the question, but you need to answer whether the accused only used the gun or not. How do you know whether the accused was using the gun, accused was firing the gun? Right? You can say, sir, we can see the fingerprinting on the gun. No, man. Then accused will tell, sir, I was cleaning the gun, I was handling my gun, it is my gun, obviously my fingerprint will be there. That doesn't mean that I shot the gun. That does not mean that I shot the gun. How would you prove whether he only shot the gun? For that, you need to remember this thing. When you are pulling the trigger, bullet and the discharges not only coming from the front, it can also come from the back. It can be deposited in the dorsum of the hands. Right? It can be deposited in the dorsum of the hand. These are all the places where you can expect the deposition of what is called as GSR. What do you mean by that? Gunshot residue. Take a swab from this area, send it for analysis. Right? We can do certain tests that is called GSR test. Right? We can find out whether the accused was using the gun or not. What are the different tests that we can use for GSR? Identifying GSR, you can remember number 1, flameless atomic absorption spectrometry, AAS, atomic absorption spectrometry. Then we've got Harrison and Gilroy test, right? We have got atomic absorption spectrometry. We can also do neutron activation analysis. So neutron activation analysis, then we have got dermal nitrates. dermal nitrate test, and finally you've got SEM EDEXA. You have got SEM EDEXA, right? SEM EDEXA is the specific test, definitive test. Fine. How do you remember all these tests? You can remember, where are you taking the swab from? You are taking the swab from the hands. You're going to find out which hand is fired. Which hand is fired, right? You can remember firing hands. Firing, Hands. That will be the mnemonic from which you can find out all the tests that we can do for GSR. And it has to be done as early as possible, because when it is more than 3 hours, gradually there will be a loss of GSR. There will be a loss of GSR more than 3 hours. So we need to do it as early as possible. As I told you, the specific one is SEM. Right? If you want to know the expansion, I'll tell you: scanning electron microscopy, energy dispersive X-ray absorptive spectrometry. Or just you can remember SEM, that should be fine. Right? So these are all the different tests that we can do for GSR. You can find out whether the person has used a gun or not. Suppose if you are suspecting GSR in the clothings, you can do what is called as infrared photography. With that, you can find out the deposition of GSR in the clothings. Okay, so that is again very important. Now let's go forward. So we were discussing about rifle gun so far. Now we'll be moving on to one more important area, that is your shotgun. Let's discuss about finding out the range of a shotgun from the wound. Right? We are going to learn about wound ballistics in a shotgun. See, now again you have to remember the discharges. I told you about flame, smoke, gunpowder. And the projectile is your lead shots. In here it is lead shot. I also told you about WAD. WAD in a shotgun, WAD, it will travel up to 2 to 5 meters. It does not produce any fatal injury. It produces only minor contusion, that's all. Now I'll tell you what are the points that you have to remember if you want to find out the range of a shotgun. Number 1, you need to find out what are the ranges we have got. Number 1, we have got contact. We have got close, we have got near, intermediate and distant. Here we have got 5 ranges: contact, close, near, intermediate and distant. Do remember, these are the 5 ranges we have got. But here, what is a contact shot? Contact shot is something you keep in contact with the skin, that is contact shot. We all know that what is a tight contact, what is loose contact, what is contact on a bony prominence. We know that. But in a shotgun, what happens is you are not expecting one bullet to come out. In a shotgun, you have a bunch of lead shots coming out and it is going to start spreading. Right? You can see the bunch of lead shots are going to come out and it will start spreading as the distance increases. You can see the lead shots started dispersing. So the appearance of the wound will differ depending on whether the fellow stands here, right? It depends on the distance. It depends on the distance, right? So for that, you remember I told you 5 ranges, right? Contact. What is close? Close shot is something less than 1 meter. What is near shot? Near shot is something between 1 to 2 meters. Intermediate shot is 2 to 4 meters. When it is more than 4 meters, we can call it as distant shot. Right? Less than 1 meter, 1 to 2 meters, 2 to 4 meters, more than 4 meters. Right? Close, near, intermediate, distant. Now, the second point that you have to remember is I was talking about the flame, smoke, gunpowder. Right? The flame in a shotgun can travel up to 15 centimeter. Smoke can travel up to 30 centimeter, maybe 30 to 45 centimeter, and gunpowder can travel up to 60 to 90 centimeter. So the point that you have to remember is approximately it can travel up to 1 meter. That is what you need to remember. Right? So if you are able to either find out tattooing or tattooing with smoke blackening, or if it is tattooing, blackening with burning, everything it has to be less than 1 meter, you can say that is close. The third point that you have to remember is dispersion pattern. I was talking about the dispersion of lead shots, but at what distance you can see the dispersion of lead shots? The lead shots will start dispersing. The lead shots will start dispersing at a distance of 2 meters. Right? Again, it depends on what kind of gun that we use. Whether we are using a fully choked gun, or we are using a half choked gun, or we are using unchoked gun. Right? It all depends on the distance. But let us discuss on an average. Dispersion starts at 2 meters. It gets completed around 4 meters. Right? It gets completed around 4 meters. Dispersion will be complete around 4 meters. 2 meters, 4 meters, enough. Right? So this is what you need to remember. Fine. This is what you need to remember. Contact, close, near, intermediate, distant. Right? And dispersion will start at 2 meters. It gets completed at 4 meters. Now let us try to apply everything here. Right? Let's try to apply everything. Contact shot, I've already told you, it can be a tight contact, it can be a loose contact, or it can be a contact on a bony prominence. Right? Now what happens? You can see the dispersion will be starting at 2 meters. You can say this is 2 meters and complete dispersion it is 4 meters. You can say that. Fine. And you can also say that I told you that effects can be seen up to 1 meter. I told you 90 centimeter, just round it off, it is 1 meter. Right? Fine. Now you can see, look at this ranges. If the person stands at this particular region, right, it is called close range because it is less than 1 meter. If the person stands at this range, it is called near range. This is close range. This is near range because it is 1 to 2 meters. If the person stands beyond the dispersion, beyond 2 meters, you can say this is intermediate range. Intermediate range. If the person stands beyond complete dispersion, you can say this is 4 meters. It is, you can say it is distant range. Distant range because it is beyond 4 meters, beyond complete dispersion. Alright, we have not done anything. We have just read about the points here and we are going to try to apply it here. As simple as that. Now look at the appearance of the wound. Let us look at the appearance of the wound. You can see that this is the appearance of the wound. Right? You can see this is a contact shot wherein you are able to keep the gun in tight contact with the skin. You can see there is stellate or cruciate margin inside the track of the wound. All the lead shots entering into the skin as a single mass. Very simple. You can say this is a contact shot on a bony prominence. Right? The second thing is you can see all the lead shots entering into the skin as a single mass. Around that single mass, you can see burning effect, blackening effect, tatting effect. So it has to be less than 1 meter. It is close shot. It is close shot. Right? It is close shot. And you can also see beyond that 1 meter in this wound, you are able to see a central single hole. No other discharges are there. When there are no other discharges, there is one hole, that means dispersion has not started. It has to be between 1 to 2 meters, that is near range. Okay, effects are also not there. Dispersion is not yet started. It has to be near range 1 to 2 meters. You can see here, you can see independent pellet holes coming out. When you are able to see independent pellet holes coming out, that means dispersion has started. When the dispersion has started, you can say it should be more than 2 meters. It is intermediate range. Right? When it is more than 2 meters, it can be 20 meters also. Right? But here you can't say like that because it is not a complete dispersion. It is incomplete. Not just now the dispersion has started. When the dispersion has started, right, when the dispersion has started, it has to be more than 2 meters. It is intermediate range. This is not a complete dispersion. Right? Here the dispersion has started. Right? Because why are you saying dispersion has started? Because you are able to see what is called as satellite holes. There is central hole around which you can see few pellets dispersed. That is called satellite holes. As the distance keeps on increasing from 2 meters onwards, as the distance keeps on increasing from 2 meters onwards, the peripheral dispersion keeps on increasing, the central hole keep on decreasing in size. At one point where there is complete dispersion, you can say it is more than 4 meters. Why do I say that is complete dispersion? That is because every pellet enters the skin independently, they don't go together. When every pellet enters the skin independently, it has to be more than 4 meters. You can say that is complete dispersion. When it is more than 4 meters, you can easily say that it is distant shot. Right? You can say that is distant shot. I have told you contact shot. I have told you close shot. I have told you near shot. I have told you intermediate. I have also told you distant. right? You just have to look at the dispersion pattern, and you also have to look at whether you are able to see the effects of flame, smoke and gunpowder or not, right? So it is as simple as that. Now let me show you 3 important images. With that, you need to find out what range of a shotgun it is, right? You can see a central hole, right? Are you able to see any discharges? No. So it has to be more than 1 meter. Contact is ruled out, close is ruled out, right? You can see a central hole and you can also see independent pellet hole. That means dispersion has started. When the dispersion has started, it has to be more than 4 meters. It's not a near shot, right? Is it a complete dispersion? It is not a complete dispersion. So it has to be less than 4 meters. More than 2 meters, less than 4 meters, it has to be intermediate shot, right? Very simple. Very, very simple. Now look at the another shot. Here you can see every pellet enters the skin independently. There is complete dispersion. When there is a complete dispersion, you can easily say that it is more than 4 meters. It has to be a distant shot. Now again, look at the another important image. Again, you can see independent lead pellets entering the skin. Again, it is complete dispersion, more than 4 meters distant, right? Distant. That's how you can easily find out which range of a shotgun wound it is, whether it's a contact, close, near, intermediate, distant, right? You just have to know when does the dispersion start, when is the dispersion getting complete. That is what we need to find out. That is what we need to find out, right? So when you're looking at a shotgun, normally we don't see any exit wound. Normally we don't see any exit wound in a shotgun because the lead pellets will be deposited in the body itself. But there are few cases where you can see exit wound. When do you see like that? Say for example, if it is a contact shot. In a contact shot, the lead pellets will enter, it might exit. 1. Number 2, if the body part is very thin, right? If the body part is very thin, it can enter, lead shots might exit. That is another one. And the third important one, if it is a tangential shot, it is just touching. When it is an oblique or tangential shot, it is touching and it is coming out. That is another possibility that you can get exit wound, right? Contact, thin body part, tangential part. These are all the places you might get exit wound in a shotgun. Otherwise, normally we don't get exit wound in a shotgun. So let's talk about the atypical bullet injuries. Let's talk about that. So this is an atypical bullet. You can see there is a hollow point bullet. I told you dum-dum bullet and hollow point bullet will deform. You can see mushrooming of bullet on impact. So this is your mushrooming. Fine. You can see this is again hollow point, right? This is tracer bullet. You can trace the direction of the bullet. That's called tracer bullet, right? All these bullets we have already discussed. Now let's talk about atypical bullet. What are atypical bullets that we have got? Number 1, it is called as tandem bullet, right? Tandem cartridge is the one that we discussed earlier, wherein you will have 2 bullets back to back inside the same cartridge itself. This is called tandem bullet. What happens if you are using old gun, unused gun for a long time? It might be rusted in the barrel, right? When you pull the trigger first time, nothing is coming out. Again, you pull the trigger, the second bullet pushes the first bullet, you can see 2 bullets back to back coming out. That is called tandem bullet. 2 bullets coming out. So that is called tandem bullet, which is also called as piggyback bullet, right? You all must have known piggyback game, right? Likewise here, 1 bullet is sitting on another bullet and 2 bullets that is coming out, we can call it as piggyback bullet. Right? 2 bullets coming out. In one of your exam, they ask very easy question. How many bullets coming out in a tandem bullet? You need to know one is 2 bullets coming out. Right? The next type of bullet is called as yawning bullet. What do you mean by yawning bullet? Yawning bullet is something, see normally the bullet has to go straight like this. Normally the bullet has to go straight like this. But if the bullet goes in irregular fashion, right? It's called yawning bullet. Right, the bullet travels in irregular path. Bullet travels in irregular path. Irregular path. We call this as yawning bullet. Right, normally yawning bullet will be going something like this, sideways. It's called yawning. Right. The third important bullet is called tumbling. What do you mean by tumbling? Tumbling bullet is something that will rotate. You can ask me, sir, all the bullets they rotate. Not like that. All the bullets spin. This is spinning. Rotation is something that goes along, rotation along long axis. It will tumble like that. Right? The bullet which rotates. Bullet which rotates. We call this as tumbling bullet. Tumbling. It may cause atypical entry wound. That is the most important point. Depending on which direction it is impacted on the skin, it can cause atypical entry wound. That's called tumbling. We have one more important bullet, that is called ricochet bullet. What do you mean by ricochet bullet? Any bullet that gets deflected. Any deflected bullet from intermediate objects. Deflected bullet from intermediate object, we call this as ricochet bullet. I can show you that. See, this bullet is tracer. You can trace the path, right? So this is basically, it's tumbling bullet. It tumbles, right? This is yawning bullet. You can see it goes in irregular fashion. That's called yawning. You can see that this person is shooting, right? It's a perpendicular bullet. You look at the axis, it is exactly straight. You have a object, right? It breaks, it goes inside, or it will hit and it might rebound. Anything. What if the bullet is shot in this oblique impact? If there is oblique impact, what happens is the bullet gets deflected to some other direction, right? If this happens to be the victim, the deflected bullet hits the person. Fine. Look at the angle. This angle is called as ricocheting angle. So that is important. Right, this angle is called as ricocheting angle. It has to be 10 to 30 degree. Only then you will have the bullet deflecting. Right, we call this as ricocheting angle. If it is going straight like this, 90 degree, it will not ricochet. Now the bullet is hitting the victim. The point is, after the bullet hitting the intermediate object, it does not spin after that. I told you earlier, only when you have spinning, you will have one important effect. If you don't have that spinning, you don't have that effect on the entry wound. What is the effect? Right. What is the effect? See, that is nothing but your abrasion collar. I told you abrasion collar is due to gyroscopic effects of the bullet. If the bullet is spinning, you will have abrasion collar. If the bullet is not spinning, you will not have abrasion collar. Not only that, you will not be having the effects of flame, smoke, gunpowder, because everything got deposited here itself. You will not see that in the wound produced by the ricochet bullet. Not only that, bullet might tumble after that. After hitting the intermediate surface, it might tumble. So you might be having atypical wound. You might be having keyhole wound. Right? So you can have atypical entry wound produced by this kind of ricochet bullet. Ricochet bullet. Fine. So remember, this is ricochet bullet. I told you that is nothing but your deflected bullet. Deflected bullet. The next important bullet is called, you can see this is your tandem bullet. I told you two bullets coming out. Right? First bullet got stuck and second bullet pushes the first bullet. Two bullets coming out. That is called tandem bullet. The next important phenomenon is called Kennedy phenomenon. What do you mean by Kennedy phenomenon? It was originally demonstrated in John F. Kennedy's assassination. They noted that in John F. Kennedy's assassination, that's why it is called Kennedy phenomenon. When you have a gunshot wound, right? You have got a victim with gunshot wound. The doctor is treating the person, right? Doctor is treating the wound, right? You can say he is doing surgery, or he might be doing any exploration. You can say iatrogenic alteration. When the doctor is treating the wound, the doctor is exploring the wound, the doctor is doing surgically treatment for the wound, what happens is the appearance of the wound will get altered. Right? The appearance of the wound gets altered. After this alteration of the wound, appearance of the gunshot wound is altered. Right? After this is altered totally, will you be able to find out whether it is contact, close, near or distant accurately? Not possible. You will find it very difficult because everything is altered. Will you be able to find out whether it is entry or exit accurately? Not possible because everything is altered. Right? If you are treating the gunshot wound, right? Because of this intervention of the gunshot wound by the doctor, right? When the determination of the range becomes so difficult, you call this as Kennedy phenomenon. What is that? It is the iatrogenic alteration of the entry wound. It is the iatrogenic alteration of the entry wound, alteration of the gunshot wound, resulting in difficulty in the range determination. You call this kind of phenomena as Kennedy phenomenon, right? Because it was first noted in John F. Kennedy's assassination, right? What do you mean by Royalissimo phenomenon? Right, Royalissimo phenomenon. Royalissimo phenomenon is very simple. It was noted in the Royalissimo region, right, in the late 1990s, when Naxalites activity were so common in that region. What happened is they will stab a person with a knife. Then after the stabbing, they will take a bullet. They will insert into the stab injury, right? It is basically inserting. It is basically you are inserting a bullet into the stab injury. Why do you want to do that? Right? Why did they want to do that? They want to confuse the investigating officer. They wanted to confuse the investigating officer. They stabbed the person. They took a bullet, inserted into the stab injury of the person. But it is so logical that when you examine the wound itself, you will be able to find out whether it is a stab injury produced by a knife or it is a punctured wound produced by a bullet. Right? You can easily find out from the effects. But still, this kind of phenomenon was common in that region. That's why it is called Royalissimo phenomenon. Right? Inserting a bullet into the stab wound. So the next bullet is your souvenir bullet. What do you mean by souvenir bullet? Souvenir bullet is very simple, that it is retained inside the body. Any bullet that is retained inside the body, retained bullet inside the body, you call it as souvenir bullet. Suppose somebody was shot, right? The bullet got lodged in the cervical region. It is so close to the C1, C2, where if you are removing the bullet, right, either by doing surgery or something or any treatment, when you are removing the bullet, there is a high chance that there can be destabilization of the cervical vertebra. It may be fatal to the person also. It may be life endangering for the patient, right? So you don't do anything, just leave it as it is. What happens? Sometimes what happens, these kind of bullet, right? Sometimes these kind of bullet, it will be developing a fibrosis around it. The body will be forming a fibrosis around the bullet. It is retained as it is without causing any harm, right? If the bullet is retained inside the body itself, you call it as souvenir bullet. You can also call it a sleeping bullet. It sleeps inside the body. But there is one problem. What is the bullet made up of? The bullet is made up of lead. So this lead from the bullet may be dissipating into the body fluids. Chronically, remotely, it may cause plumbism. What is plumbism? Plumbism is chronic lead poisoning, right? Chronic lead poisoning. So this retained bullet may cause one of the remote complications of this retained bullet or souvenir bullet is chronic lead poisoning, that is plumbism, right? So we were discussing about the atypical effects in a bullet. Now we'll be discussing about atypical effects in a shotgun. Let's talk about atypical effects in a shotgun. When you are having this atypical effects in a shotgun, sometimes it may be causing difficulty in range determination, right? It may be causing difficulty in range determination for a shotgun. That's why it is important. So we'll discuss about what are the effects. We'll discuss about what are the effects which are atypical, and here we'll be discussing about two important effects. What are they? Let us say this is the barrel of the shotgun. Right? This is the barrel of the shotgun. You pull the trigger, all the lead shots coming out. And all the lead shots, as the distance increases, they start dispersing like this. Right? They start dispersing like this. And let us say here is the victim. Every lead shot enters the skin of the victim independently, normally. So when you look at the wound, the entry wound should be looking like this. Right? Every pellet enters the skin independently. There is complete dispersion. You can easily say that it is more than 4 meters or distant range, doesn't matter. Right? What you can see is all the lead shots enter the skin independently. This should be the normal phenomenon. This should be the normal phenomenon. But what happens sometimes when you are firing the gun, because of the heat, some of the lead shots, they group together. Some of the lead shots, they group together, they get stuck together. It may be due to lot of lubricant that you have used. It may be due to lot of grease that you have used, or it may be due to the heat, right? Because of the heat, all the lead shots getting stuck together, molten lead shots stuck together. It is forming a ball, right? You can see there is a balling of the lead shots. When such balling is going together, all the remaining pellets will be entering independently into the skin, but this ball alone will enter. It will go together. It will enter the skin in a separate hole. I repeat, when you have balling of shots, this balling of shot will enter the skin independently in a separate hole. The remaining lead shots will disperse normally, usually it will enter the skin in a usual pattern, independently. Now, when you look at the entry wound, will you be seeing something like this? No. You will not see something like this. The balling of lead shots, it entered the skin independently. The balling of shots entered the skin separately. So, you will find a central large hole like this. Central large hole like this. Around the large central hole, you could see independent lead pellets entering the skin. You will find only something like this. Normally, it has to be a distant range. But how does it look like? It looks like an intermediate range. A distant range looks like an intermediate range. This is called balling of shot, also called as welding of shot, right? This is because of incomplete dispersion of the lead shots. Why there is incomplete dispersion of lead shots? Maybe due to excess grease, maybe due to excess lubricant, or because of the heat, the lead shots got stuck together. We call this as balling of shots. This is one effect, balling of shot. There is one more effect you need to remember. Assume that you have taken the same shotgun, right? The lead shots coming out. Let us assume the person is standing in this range itself. Normally what happens, the lead shots here at this range, it has to go in the single hole, right? In the single hole itself, it has to go inside. But now what happens here, before the lead shots entering the skin, there is one intermediate surface is there. It may be a tight leather jacket worn by the victim. Or this lead shots entering there is a glass surface, this lead shots breaking a glass surface and then entering into the skin, right? If there is an intermediate object, I repeat, if there is an intermediate object, what happens here is the lead shots on hitting the intermediate object, it gets erratically dispersed. You can see the lead shots coming out. You can see these are the lead shots, red color. The lead shots on hitting the intermediate object, maybe a glass surface, right? On hitting the intermediate object, it faces a resistance. There is a momentary stoppage, there is slowing of the lead shot, and from behind, this lead shot is hit by the subsequent lead shots. They hit together. They collide with each other. They hit with each other. Because of this, there is erratic dispersion that you can see. Right? There is erratic dispersion of the lead shots. When there is erratic dispersion of the lead shots, every pellet enter the skin independently. Normally, you should have seen something like this. But because of this erratic dispersion, you are not seeing something like this. Instead, you will find independent lead pellets entering the skin. This is because of erratic dispersion. Right? This is because of erratic dispersion when the lead shots passes through an intermediate object, intermediate surface. Right? Normally it should have been looking like a near shot. But now how does it appear? It appears like a distant shot because you can see erratic dispersion, complete dispersion of lead shots. It looks like a distant range. It should have been seen like a near range. Now it is seen like a distant range. It is due to erratic dispersion. That is because all the lead shots, they collide with each other. When they collide with each other, this kind of effect is called as billiard ball ricochet effect. Right? This is called billiard ball ricochet effect. I told you balling of shot, where there is incomplete dispersion. Now there is billiard ball ricochet effect, where there is erratic dispersion. In both the situations, we will be getting difficulty in range determination. We will be finding difficulty in range determination. First one, I told you there is incomplete dispersion. Right? Incomplete dispersion is there. This is where you get what is called as balling of shots. Right? This is also called as balling of shot. This is otherwise called as welding of shots. Both are same. Right? Sometimes there can be erratic dispersion. When there is erratic dispersion, what happens? There can be excessive dispersion of the lead shots. Even though the range is very less, it looks like a distant range. That is due to erratic dispersion. We call this as billiard ball ricochet effect. Right? This is because of billiard ball ricochet effects. Right? Balling of shot, it may be due to increased lubricant. Right? Increase lubricant. Fine. Why there is erratic dispersion? There may be intermediate surface. As I told you, the person is wearing a tight clothing, or there is any glass surface in between. So all these things can cause erratic dispersion. We call it as billiard ball ricochet effect. Do remember, both are very different. In billiard ball ricochet effect, there is erratic dispersion. In balling of shot, there is incomplete dispersion. You call it as balling of shots. There is one more effect that we have to discuss, that is called Cronlane shot. What is it? Cronlane shot. Cronlane shot. What is that? Cronlane shot. This is commonly seen with the shotgun. Not so commonly seen with the rifle gun. This is commonly seen with a shot. What happens is, let us assume this is a shotgun. Right? And it is a contact shot on the skull. Let us say this happens to be the skull. You fire. So I told you this is a contact shot. You keep it on the skull. Fire. What happens when you are firing? Because of the energy, there is sudden explosion. You can see when the gas enters suddenly inside, there is expansion of the gases inside. There can be sudden expulsion of the brain parenchyma itself from inside the skull. Right? You can see the brain parenchyma completely expelled out because of the expansion of the gas inside. Right? Because you keep a contact shot of the shotgun, keep it on the skull, you pull the trigger, all the gas that is coming out, it is expanding inside the skull will get fractured, you can get extensive fracture, the brain parenchyma alone will be expelled out. We call this as Cronlane shot. Remember, it is the expulsion of the brain from the skull. Right? That's called Cronlane shot.